Astrology Hub TV, and I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Walsh, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Astrology Hub. And Astrology Hub TV is a weekly show dedicating to helping you explore your connection to the cosmos and how cultivating this connection can help you live a more empowered, fulfilling, and vibrant life. We're here live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you'd like to receive a Facebook message when we go live, you can do so by signing up for live alerts. The link to do this is in the chat. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our guest, Carol Ferris, here very soon. But before that, I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate today's Capricorn full moon. Yesterday, we had an evolutionary astrologer, Kaipacha, lead us in our inner circle. And the things that he talked about, he gave a forecast of the Capricorn full moon, a mastery class on the soul's evolutionary path, and then left us with a Kundalini yoga ceremony. And we had over 400 people attend live. And Kaipacha shared with us many things that I think you can relate to. So I wanted to take a few minutes before we dive into our topic to just share some of the key insights that I took away from the talk. And hopefully these will be helpful for you too. All right, so this is not only from the class, but also from our roundup article. So if you have not yet checked out our Capricorn full moon roundup article, you can do so now. The link to check that out is in the chat. So that's our full moon article that we do every month. So basically, this Capricorn full moon gives us an opportunity to step into a more authentic and fulfilling life if we're willing to do our work. With Saturn retrograde and conjunct the moon, the climb may feel steep in the coming months, but the rewards will be worth it. So Saturn opposite the sun is helping us rekindle commitments we made back in December and bring them into more solid form for the next 6 months. So if you can just take a moment and reflect back to December, and were there certain commitments that you entered into at that time? Were there certain contracts that you signed? Were there certain agreements that you made with people? So just take a moment to reflect on that and see where you're at now with those commitments and those agreements. And then the next 6 months are designed to help you actually bring more form into those. So the last 6 months has been like planting those seeds and letting them get fertilized and helping them get to a place where they can grow. And now the next 6 months is going to be about actually bringing them more into form. All right. Another thing about this lunation cycle is you may be challenged to find a healthy balance between your work life and your home life. So this is the Capricorn Cancer polarity. And so with the moon in Capricorn, your intuition may naturally flow towards more work, but with the sun in Cancer, you may also feel pulled to be more at home, cooking, spending time with family and friends, or maybe taking care of yourself. And one of the things Kaipacha said is that if you don't pay attention to that the universe will find a way to ensure that you do. So wherever you're sort of out of balance, we're being asked to really bring that balance in and not be complete workaholics and not spend all of our time working, really spend some time enjoying, spending time with friends and family. And I know with me, with my girls out of school for the summer, I'm actually forced to do that as well. So many of you are probably having a similar experience, and sounds like that's what we need to be doing on some levels. All right, so this is just a few of the themes that Kaipacha shared yesterday. If you're interested in getting full, in-depth, new and full moon forecasts from the different leading astrologers that we feature here at Astrology Hub and their mastery class trainings, you can do so by joining the inner circle. And so registration's closed right now, but if you would like to find out more about that when enrollment opens, I highly encourage you to join our wait list. So you can do so with a link in the chat and hopefully also in the description of this video. So you can actually just join the wait list and learn more about it when enrollment opens. Okay, so Carol Ferris is going to talk about some really, really interesting things with us today. She is one of those people that I feel like is this hidden gem that we found or we discovered. Anna actually, one of our 18 angels, went to a talk that she gave in San Francisco and came back and was like, oh my gosh, we need to feature this woman. She's amazing. And so today you're going to learn what the word horoscope actually means and what questions it can answer, how a lunation cycle expresses the arc and development of a lifetime, where to find your place in the lunation cycle, and how astrology is interwoven into classical Chinese medicine. And we were talking about this a little bit backstage before we went live, and it's fascinating. So can't wait to share that with you. All right, so a little bit more about Carol. Carol has been a devoted student of astrology and supporting astrology clients for over 45 years. Besides her private astrology practice, she also teaches at the Portland School of Astrology and hosts regular workshops, events, and classes. She is a wealth of information, and we are so honored to have her here. All right, so one of the things we're going to be talking about is astrology for like your current life versus astrology for getting a perspective of the bigger picture. So I'd love to ask all of you out there, and if you don't mind chatting in, it'd be great to see your responses. Do you use astrology more to get insight into your current life, like what's happening today, what's happening right now for you? Or do you like to use it as a tool to get a bigger picture of the world and how you play a role in this larger storyline that's playing out? So I'd love to hear your responses there. And Carol, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It is truly an honor to share you with our community. And yes, it's so much fun to listen to. So let's just dive in. Carol, can you start with how you define the word horoscope?
Well, the word itself, the English word horoscope, horo is hour and scope is map or chart. So it's a map of the hour. And I, especially when I'm working with clients for whom it's truly a foreign language, they're not quite sure how they found their way to me. I always begin with the map because it's a map of a geography and a season. And what it says is we're here, that we have arrived here out of we could say the Neptunian matrix. We've arrived out of the oceanic sort of chaotic, non-formed matrix and risen out of this incredible field into an integral, separate being, and that rises with a great deal of specificity. And I think that the map, the simplest way I think to think about a horoscope is not all times are like all other times, and not all places are like all other places. And that we know something about that. In that respect, astrology, can be very complex and very discriminating. But on a really basic level, we know that December is not like June, and that Abu Dhabi is not like Portland, Oregon. And even though we may not have been on the ground in those places, we have the sense that a certain kind of life rises there in that moment, in that season, in that place. And that it's not climbing into a suit of armor. It's not like, well, this is it. This is how you're going to be all your life. But that it's a picture, a map of an adaptation about how we begin. So that's my long-winded answer to the question, what I think a horoscope is. It's a lovely picture of a story that we step into and begin to make our own. I can't hear you.
I was on mute. I'm so sorry. A rookie move there. What do you say to the people who feel trapped by their horoscope?
Well, especially if you're in a difficult patch, or you feel that you look around with envy or longing at a different kind of life. And we all do that. Everybody does that. Because it's a part of your growth. And it's actually a part of how you grow is this working for me? Is this not working for me? As I look around the world, there's someone for whom it's working. What's the takeaway from that? So when I'm talking with someone who's really struggling, what we talk about, and this is what distinguishes me in a way from more traditional astrological thinking, because the strict interpretations of debilities or of exaltations, hard aspects, that this is a beginning, not a curse, but that it is a beginning, and that we start somewhere and it works for us. And it might not work the way we wish that our lives worked, but it works the way it works. I remember listening to the wonderful astrologer Rob Hand talking about a debilitated Mars. And he said, this is before he sort of went a more traditional direction, that Mars in Libra is considered to be in detriment, but it works the way it works. So what I concentrate on when I'm talking about an interpretation is, let's go back and talk about how it works, where it works, the way it works, and then see how else it might. You know, not this is it, this is your portion, the fates have strung the thread out and they've cut your portion and this is it. And I think that there was a time when that kind of thinking, that's the thinking that was available to us, and it was the spirit of the thinking that was available to us. But we live in a much different time, and we have a much different collective way of thinking about what the meaning of our lives is and how that meaning intersects with other meaning. So when I'm talking with someone who's got it tough, we talk about what is working, what about this is working for you, because often we've adapted for very, very good reasons, and it's suited us in the past, but it's not doing us very much good now.
I love that, focusing on where it actually does work too, because when we focus there, that's what will expand. So instead of where it doesn't work or where it's hard, it's like, well, how does it work? And how, I don't know exactly how you said it, but it was brilliant.
How else might, so Mars in Libra, it's not, oh, I don't have Mars in Aries or Mars in Capricorn, so I'll never be a field commander and have these exalted territories. It's my mastery in my territory is relational and has to do with creating mastery and territory for other people. It works that way. It doesn't mean that you couldn't then try and take on being a field commander, an exalted Mars, but it works the way it works.
Thank you for that example. That helps to really make it more clear. Okay. So, let's talk about the role of light and dark and how these play a role in how we interpret astrology.
All right, my favorite topic. And it really was being introduced to classical Chinese medical thinking that began to expand my astrological perspective, because we talk about the sun, and I say this almost every reading. The sun is 4.5 billion tons of hydrogen and helium exploding per second. It's huge. And it's been burning a long time, and it's going to explode and burn a lot longer. And that the incredible force of the explosion creates orbital stability in the system, and it brings heat and light to us in the system. And so not only is it the heartbeat of our system, of the planetary system, but elegantly and symbolically, it's our heartbeat. It's what stabilizes us. It's what explodes and burns. It what brings heat and light to our consciousness. It makes everything grow. So I think about the sun in the chart that way. The moon doesn't burn. And in some of more ancient cultures, what they said about the moon is she carries light. So we talk about transferring light or carrying light. But when I began to truly understand the distinction of yang and yin, and the simplest way to describe yang and yin is it's two sides of a hill. And the yang side of the hill is the side that's in the light, and the yin side of the hill is the side that's in the shadow. It's the same hill, but the quality of light is changing the nature of your experience in relationship to a whole thing. So when I think about light, I think about it as pure moving energy, not just yang as masculine, not just yang as force. And I was quite moved by the author, Anthony Doerr, who wrote the beautiful novel, All the Light We Cannot See. And he was in Portland to talk about it, and he wanted people to understand why he chose that title. And he said his brother is a scientist and a geek, and he had him looking through an electron microscope. And that he began to understand that of all the light there is, of all the light, of the complete spectrum, the human eye sees 1/10 trillionth of all the light there is. So those are big numbers around big forces. And in astrology, we bring that down to the sun in the map, in the geography. So it's potent. Light is potent and animating and radiant. The dark isn't a negative. In the yin definition of that, it creates the container so the light has some place to rest. So when you look at the yin yang symbol, that's why there's a white dot at the bottom where it's the darkest time of the year. So at the darkest time of the year, we already know it's going to move towards the light. And at the lightest time of the year, the solstice, we already know that the days are going to become shorter. And that when you really begin to think about light and dark, and you think about probably at the level of to atoms, at a nano level, at a daily level, at a monthly level, at a yearly level, and over a long arc of development, there's movement and rest, and movement and rest. And that the rest is what makes the yin energy, is what makes it possible for the yang to move and do its job, essentially. So I really pay attention to the sun and the moon, not only in the natal horoscope, obviously we all do by sign and by house and by aspect, but especially when I'm doing work beyond the natal chart, the lunation cycle is, for me, one of the most useful and in some ways the most predictive cycles that you can gift a client with, because it describes cycles of growth and development and harvest, and then decay and seed making and rest again.
So how do you bring in those definitions of yin and yang into interpersonal dynamics, like between a male and a female? How does that play out?
Well, I think that I have probably been practiced as much as any contemporary astrologer in thinking of the sun as masculine and as, in some senses, as father, and the moon as feminine, and in some senses as mother. And that they are certainly markers in charts, not just between a man and a woman, between a man and a man and a woman and a woman. And if you think about what's possible for us in terms of gender now, and what's possible for us in terms of identity, then the sun is still the marker of the heartbeat. What makes our hearts leap up? So what makes a heart leap up in the spring is different than what makes a heart leap up in when it's winter. And if you think about the sun as this incredible force for stability and consciousness, and the moon as the ability to carry and nourish and hold that, then when you look at the charts of two people, I always, clearly a sun opposite a moon, or a sun square a moon in another person's chart, will tell you something about how people are going to deal with their active light and with their sweeter, softer, more, in a way, comforting and nourishing light. I mean, this is sort of one of my throwaway lines. I think that the moon is the astrologer's full employment act, because the moon in the horoscope will tell an astrologer something about how do you metabolize matter and turn it into chi. How do you eat a movie? How do you eat oatmeal? How do you eat how your mother treats your sister? It's all of the whole lunar idea of how we take things in and make them ours is much, much different than how the sun expresses its dynamic in a radiant kind of forceful way, even when the sun is a wintry sun. So that's kind of my approach to it.
Very nice. Okay. when you're looking at a chart, where do you find the meaning of someone's life in the larger context of the universe's existence?
Woo, that's a big question.
Good question.
Well, there's a really lovely shorthand way to talk about it. I think that don't take credit for this at all. If you read Demetra George's lovely work that she's done on making traditional astrology meaningful for contemporary astrologers and their clients, when you look at meaning in the chart of where are you in the larger scheme of things, she borrows from the Greek tradition. And of course, the Greeks borrowed it from the Hellenists, and the Hellenists borrowed it from the Arabs and the Sumerians and Mesopotamians and the Hindus. And so there's this very rich tradition about meaning and manifestation that comes up into the Greek model, into the horoscopic model. And in that iteration, your horoscope is the ship to sail the sea of life. Why get a ship? Why incarnate? And so it's the sun by sign and by house. That's why to get a ship. What's the purpose? What's the soul's purpose, SOUL purpose, in deciding to sail? And what's the soul purpose? What's the only reason that you would be here? And so the sun is, I'm setting sail. And this is the nature of the journey that I want to make. This is the reason that I'm here in the journey I want to make. The moon is, how do you pay for it? How do you put provisions in the hold? How do you nourish the voyage? And the rising sign and any planet that's on the ascendant and the ruler of the sign that's rising, if it's in strong aspect to the rising sign, what the Greeks would have said is, can the helmsman see the helm? Is what direction are you going to steer to achieve your purpose and to pay for the journey? So the metaphor extends much more broadly. How do you insure the ship? Where are you likely to go? But I love that metaphor of how will you sail, and why would you sail, and where will you sail, and so it puts us in the bigger world. It puts us in time, and it puts us in a place. And the thing I like best of it at all, and why I'm taking these storytelling classes, is because it's an image and a story. Mm. Did that answer your question?
It does, and it actually opens up a ton of other questions, but then I just checked myself and said, let's go in a different direction.
All right.
Okay, all right. So can we talk about how classical Chinese medicine relates to astrology?
You bet.
All right.
All our ancestors lived on the earth, in time, in the cosmos, and had a deep, deep respect for the rhythms of nature. And it's partly survival, and it's partly worship. It's partly devotion. How do you align yourself? First of all, how do you pay attention to the rhythms of nature? And once you have some sense of its rhythm, and a part of how you have a sense of the rhythm is not just how much light or how much dark or what's the weather, but where are the planets and the stars? You know, the Babylonians called the planets Bibu, which is a word for sheep or wanderer, because they saw that the fixed stars didn't move and the planets did. So all these ancient cultures, including the Chinese culture, had this sense of variation within rhythm, and then began to be devoted to the study of it. And then how do you govern? Not only how do you govern yourself, which is how do you be healthy, but to the emperor, how do you align us with heaven? Not in the sense of heavens, it was called Tianming, the heavenly mandate. So it's a very old idea in the Chinese culture that good government, how we'll all live together and be well, has its life drawn from an alignment with time and place. So in that alignment of time and place, every season, what we call the Zodiac signs, if we think about it as months, they don't think about it as months. They think about it as a kind of seasonal stage in a metabolic process, then those are what are called the earthly branches. And they are roughly analogous to the West zodiac signs. The constellations of the zodiac in the Chinese system are more like the nakshatras of Yodish astrology. They're the lunar mansions, or they're called the Shu, or the lunar lodges. So that's a whole different story. I won't talk about the specific constellations and the movement of the sun and the moon and the planets through the lunar lodges. The earthly branches are, what is nature doing now? And so what should we be doing now? So for example, in what we would call Capricorn time, it's the time of the rat. And the rat is not a constellation in the sky. It lives here with us, and it can live in the dark, and it can live in the cold. And it can sustain itself by folding itself into the dark. So that relates in the Chinese system to nature preparing itself. It's not unlike the idea of Capricorn, that when there's not enough light to grow, then it's time to conserve what you have stored from the prior cycle and prepare yourself for the long wait until there's maximum light again. And so that's associated in health and in the human body with the gallbladder, that the gallbladder deep in winter and deep in a 24-hour period, which was between 11 at night and 1 in the morning, in the deepest part of your body, your cosmos is beginning while you're deep asleep to prepare itself for the metabolic process of the day. And then as the light begins to grow, which is roughly what we would call Aquarius, then the system begins to take those preparations and it begins to strategize and talk about what it's going to do next. And in the classic Chinese medical system, that's related to the liver, and the two archetypes of the two organs, which are also the organs of the cosmos, the gallbladder and the liver, is the liver is really the general, and the gallbladder is the drill sergeant. And so deep in winter, deep in the dark, preparations are being made that will keep you ready and prepared to become more active. So, I can exhaustively take you through the entire system and all the body parts, but that's really the kind of thinking. And when I began to meet Chinese medical practitioners, and I had the very good fortune to go to China a couple of times, deep in Sichuan and Tibet, and to meet not the originators of the system, but the people who are still really practicing that kind of medicine today, classical Chinese medicine, it made so much sense to me in terms of the horoscope, that now when I look at a horoscope, I'm automatically translating between the Western signs and the Chinese system.
And do you practice this with clients?
Mm-hmm.
You do. So
yeah.
Give like a practical application of someone who comes to you, like give us an example maybe.
Okay. So I had a client just that I was talking with earlier today who has just been diagnosed with an asymptomatic heart problem. And she didn't know what was wrong. She can't feel that her heart is racing. And she has a very powerful conjunction, Sun-Pluto conjunction in the 6th house. And she put herself out of sinus rhythm by working too hard. Mm-hmm. And so the Cancer Leo planets in the 6th, so what we call Cancer, the sign Cancer, in the Chinese system is not so much the idea of the breasts and the stomach and the belly, but that it's the heart of the year, that it's the heart of the system. So it has that same idea of centrality in terms of the body, but it doesn't localize itself in the Chinese system the way it does in the Western system. So it was very clear from looking at her chart, because now she's having to move from Chinese thinking to a Western doctor and a Western solution, that she didn't pay attention to her heart. And not just that it's the sun, but it's the Cancer Leo placement in the 6th house that is, she is using all of her light to work, not to live. And that in the process of not paying attention to her heartbeat, she's put herself out of rhythm. So we had a long talk about that. Sometimes if I see something where there's in a 6th house, in a Western horoscope, in a 6th house body diagnosis, if you see strong transits, as all of us are doing, of Saturn, Lilith, Pluto, and the moon in Capricorn, or a stronger kind of transit in Capricorn, then there's gallbladder issues, and the sort of the psychological, spiritual analog of the drill sergeant's job is to put your foot down and make a decision and take action and begin. Actually, think of it like Leonard Cohen, the song he sings, the crack is how the light gets in. So the job of the gallbladder is to begin, even if it's not perfect, even if you don't know what the outcome is, to prepare yourself and to take a step. And when someone can't or won't do that, and of course Saturn and Capricorn makes everybody, how am I going to take this step? Then we see a lot of funny metabolic problems that come out of that, problems with digestion, problems with fat metabolization, that kind of thing.
I want to ask the audience, we have considered many times doing a whole panel or event around medical astrology and the different ways that we can utilize astrology to work with the body. And I'm just curious to know how many of you would be interested in that, because it's definitely something that we're interested in. And there's people like Carol and many others who are doing work in this area and have so much to offer us. So again, just curious to hear how you all feel about it, and if you would be interested in that. So Carol, that's fascinating. And it just seems like it gives another layer of understanding of what's happening with someone, with their physical life. And it really is incorporating the spirit and the soul perspective as well into the diagnosis.
Well, if we think about the horoscope, not in a rigid way of this and only this, but that it's organic, and that it's a form, it's an organic form, and that it responds to place and temperature and nutrition and current events. And that not only do we have the challenge of knowing how to be well, which sometimes how we're taught to nourish ourselves is not always what's actually nourishing to us. And that's not only a kind of individual or a familial issue, but a larger cultural challenge. And so being well governed, knowing how to govern yourself, and I don't mean that in any sort of limited or Saturnian way, has very large ramifications for the collective and vice versa. So I'm endlessly interested in it, and I really pay attention to world events, not just national events, but world events in terms of the whole of the cosmic body and of the political body. And that is very much how the Chinese thought about it, that it was, and it's very much actually how the Mesopotamians thought about it, that it's the job of leaders to not so much read the signs, but to align themselves with heaven's rhythms. What is it time to do now? And model that kind of behavior so that everything is well governed. And I think that's not it's a pretty simple idea. It has complex ramifications, but it's really a very simple idea.
Well, and it's one we can actually take into our family lives, it's not just, leaders around the globe, but if you're a leader of your family, if you're a leader in your workplace, it's something that any leader can model as much as possible. Carol, this is a little bit of a divergence, but maybe not so much. We had a Vedic astrologer named Vic on about 2 weeks ago, and he was saying that Chinese astrology is more different from Western astrology than Vedic astrology. Like Vedic and Western are actually more alike and
Yes.
Chinese is actually way more different. Does Chinese astrology play into the Chinese medicine at all, or is it?
It can and it does, but what I've just been talking about is the perspective of classical Chinese medical thinking that's really related to season and place, including if you ate a peach that grew on a tree the north of the Yangtze, it will be a different peach and it will nourish you in a different way than a peach from a tree south of the Yangtze. So the idea of place and time is really very integral to that kind of thinking. It is not, strictly speaking, a Chinese horoscope. The classical Chinese horoscope is what's called the 8-pillar Batsa. And its calculation really puts you deep into your ancestors, to your ancestral line, to your grandparents, to your parents, to your family, to your society. And one of the best lessons that I had when I was in China was I was asked to do the horoscope of one of our teachers, our Chinese teachers. So I did a Western horoscope for him. It was all translated, and he listened. And we got to the end, and he bowed to me and he said, "That was very astute, but it was only about me." And I just thought, I understood right away what he meant, that I had not put him in the way his culture would put him in a vast, integrated human, and not just a psychological and spiritual and human landscape, but an ancestral landscape and a physical landscape. The 8-pillar Batsa, which is a very complex astrology, and there are wonderful, wonderful teachers in it, many of whom come to Portland. Is a different, very different kind of astrology and a different kind of relationship to land and sky than the Western zodiac, no matter what house system you practice, and Yodish. So it's a very astute observation. But the analog of time and place of Western to Chinese in terms of the body and the cosmic body, those are analogous.
Okay. Can you show everybody your books behind you? Can you just show them? This is this is Carol's bookshelf. And every time I love the fire. It's so cozy. Every time we talk, the depth of your knowledge and the breadth of your knowledge is just astounding. So I am so grateful that you are going to be our next Inner Circle lunar cycle guide. Carol, can you tell us a little bit about, obviously you'll be giving a new moon and a full moon forecast.
Yes.
Can you please tell us, first of all, if there's any angle of that forecast that you'll be focusing on, and then second of all, what you'll be covering in your mastery class training?
What I'll be covering is the lunation cycle. And it's, as a technique, you can just go to astro.com and get your lunation cycle from a program. Because I came to astrology in the days before computers and calculated charts by hand, really for the first 15 years that I did astrology, I like putting my hand to it, and I like counting. I like counting as a technique. So I'm going to teach both ways to calculate where you are currently in the lunation cycle. I have some clients who want to see where they were when they were 15, where they're going to be when they're 90. So not only will we talk about the particular moons of the new moon and the full moon, and we'll talk about the transits for the month that I'll be speaking. But I'm really going to talk about how we live comfortably with where we are, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the culture to what I would call live in summer or harvest all the time. And nature's just not like that, including our own natures. So we'll go through the lunation cycle, and we'll help everybody find how to find where you are over the 30 years of the cycle. So if you live long enough, you'll live through 3 versions of the 30-year cycle. And most of us expect to live that long.
Carol, what do you think this, when our community is armed with this next layer of information, what does it help them do in their lives? How does it help them see their life different, experience life differently?
I think the greatest gift of the lunation cycle is how hard do you have to be working? How hard do you have to be pushing? So with my young clients, if they find they're in the dark moon, it makes them nuts. And my favorite example of this is I said to a girl she'd received an absolutely wonderful scholarship. She went off. I said, don't push. Just think of yourself as having all of these great seeds in the dark, and that you want them to gain strength through rest. And that if they get strong through rest, that as the light begins to grow, they'll be strong enough to meet the light. And by the time it really gets light, they'll be so stable and they'll be so strong that they'll be able to shoot up. Well, that's a 7-year arc. She broke her back. She pushed so hard in the dark that she broke her back. And essentially, she interrupted the next 30 years of growth.
Whew.
And so to know, is it time to harvest? And if you're in a harvest period, which we all love harvest, it includes sometimes a bitter harvest. And that we see that we have made a commitment over a 20-year period, and that we're getting the wonderful benefits of the harvest, but this too, that we may not be able to eat what we've grown, or we may not want to. And so the great gift of the lunation cycle is not, well, just get used to it. It's if it's summer, we tend to think of summer as shorts and vacations and sandals. But if you're a farmer, you're up before the sun comes up and you don't go to bed until it's dark. And so if we're in the full part of the cycle, we want to make hay while the sun shines, so that when we get to the harvest, we know that we cannot be denied the harvest. And then when we get to the harvest is over and we're weighing and measuring and sorting, we want to know that we'll be able to create new life as it begins to get dark again, because of what we've stored. So the great benefit of the cycle is, and I have so many people who go, oh, I can relax now. I see what it's time to do now.
Carol, how much does our chronological age play into the calculation, or is it?
In the lunation cycle, chronological age has nothing to do with it. And of course, all of us who are enamored with the Saturn returns, with the Uranus returns, those are, and especially I use the Huber age point, which is an absolutely tied to chronological age, and I value it, and I value the kind of contribution it can make to self-understanding about where you are in a long. So the Huber is 72-year cycle, but so I pay attention to those. But the lunation cycle has nothing to do with age, and we all, if you're in your Saturn return and you're in the dark moon of the cycle, then you won't be in the same place as someone who's in a Saturn return, who's in the full part of the cycle. And so it's not like, oh, darn, I wish I was someplace else. It's how to do well where it is that you are at this time.
All right, Carol, well, I am so excited to dive even more deeply into all of this with you next lunar cycle. And one of the things I love the most about the inner circle, and we were talking about this before we started today, is we're going from this month with Kaipacha, 6 planets in Leo, so much fire, so much energy. And then we get to come to you, Carol, and there's such an earthy energy to you, and just this real practical earth. I just feel so much earth, so that's one of the beautiful things about the inner circle, is that we actually do get to have a natural rhythm and flow with our lunar cycle guides and benefit from all of it. So thank you so much for being a part of the inner circle. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Yes. Everyone gets to interact with you even more. Amazing. And for those of you who are not yet members, again, I encourage you to sign up for the wait list, and that way you'll get more information when enrollment opens. And I want to, Carol, is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we close out?
No, I think that's what we made a good start. Thank you.
Oh, good. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. And thanks to all of you. I've been looking at your comments as we've been going along. It's so nice to see your enthusiasm. A lot of people said yes about medical astrology, Carol. So I think that's probably a path we'd like to explore. So thank you so much for all of your engagement and your interaction, for showing up here week after week, and for your love of astrology. It makes what we do so much fun. So thank you for that. And thank you for making astrology a part of your life. And we'll see you next week. Actually, no, sorry. Next week we're not having Astrology Hub TV. So just letting you know, I will be on a staycation with my family. It's my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. They're doing a vow renewal that I actually get to lead the ceremony for them. It's gonna be a very, very special time. I feel like I'm somewhat taking Kai Pacha's advice and interweaving more family and fun and sun into my existence. So doing our best, right? All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you a couple weeks from today.
Bye-bye.